Welcome to SBC Sunday Morning Gathering. My name is Bree and I work on the staff team here at SBC. Today we will be concluding our sermon series on freedom. Steve Kensel and the band will lead us in songs of worship. But before we go any further, let's hear from In the Know.
Good morning and welcome to In the Know for January the 31st. I'm Pastor Dell. We're starting to plan right now for a big celebration service on March the 7th. And so we need a little bit of lead time, but some of the key components that we're going to be covering right then are baby dedications. So any of you who have a child that you would like to dedicate, we want to have you contact Pastor Bree, and she will lead you through all of the process for that and prepare then for baby dedication on that Sunday. The second component are going to be baptisms. So if the Lord has put on your heart that you need to take that step of obedience and follow the Lord in baptism, then just let any one of us as staff know, and we will walk through the process with you. And pending any regulations from the BC government, there's a possibility that you could even have immediate family be in the room at the same time, because of course these are going to be recorded, the baptism in the tank up in the sanctuary, and then we'll place them on the live stream. So if you're interested, contact any one of us as staff. And the third component is church membership. So if you've been thinking about that, you want to join us to be a real partner here at Summerland Baptist Church, we would encourage you to make us aware, actually call the office, and Corrine will kind of fill you in on the process. We're going to be doing some classes online through Zoom on February the 10th and 17th, and so you can get in on that. So those are three of the main components for our big celebration service on March the 7th. We've just started kind of a new initiative called our Daily Devotional Phone Line. Now, this is really geared for anyone who is in need of getting some perspective, some encouragement, a challenge from God's Word in about 5 minutes. So I've been offering those every day, Monday to Friday, and all you have to do to listen in is to call our church telephone number. So 250-494-3881, and as soon as that call is answered automatically or automated, then you just hit number 2 and it'll take you directly to the devotional. So you can listen for those 4 or 5 minutes, and then if you would like, you can even leave a message. Maybe you have a need, you'd like someone to call you and pray for you, or you know somebody else in our community who has a need. This is a great way of keeping in the loop and keeping us in the loop of what's going on in your life and others as well. So we encourage you to call in, and maybe if you know somebody that needs that encouragement, give that number to other folks as well, our church number, and then dial 2, and so that anybody, even in a different province or whatever, who can dial into our number and get that devotional line. Right now, I'm just going to hand off on this video to Austin from our leadership board, and he's got an announcement he would like to make for you.
Good morning, church family. My name is Austin Oyella, and I serve on the leadership board. Over the last 4 years, the leadership and church family have gone through a tumultuous time of searching for a lead ministry pastor. While this time has been difficult, it has not been wasted. We believe that God has used this time to invite us into deeper relationship with Him and with each other, to mold us as His people and strengthen our faith in Him. Currently, we cannot gather together as a church family. We want to encourage you that God is with us, that God is with us when we meet both physically and virtually, and God will continue to be with us in the future. For the last 8 months, Pastor Lee Young has served as our interim lead ministry pastor, leading our staff team and ministering to our community and church family. When the leadership board asked Lee to assume this position, he did so without hesitation, knowing that God was calling him to lead us during this time of transition. Lee has excelled in this role, leading with poise, maturity, and grace. As we look to the future, the leadership board is excited to announce that we are putting forward Lee Young as our candidate for lead ministry pastor. Over the last 3 years, Lee has shown considerable growth in terms of leadership vision and maturity. After seeking God's direction through much prayer and much discussion, the leadership board strongly believes that God is calling Lee Young to be our next lead ministry pastor. While the leadership board is taking this action, we feel that the church family needs to reach this conclusion in a unified way. And so with that in mind, we will be going through an extensive candidating process. This candidating process will include interviews with the leadership board, staff team, deacons board, and other lay boards. It will also include a process where Lee answers questions from the church family. As we embark on this journey, this exciting journey together, we ask for your prayer. If you would like to reach out to the leadership board, please send us an email or contact one of us directly. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Austin. Well, thanks for joining us, folks, for In the Know. And now you are in the know.
Rise as we wait upon the Lord, we will wait upon the Lord, we will wait upon the Lord. Strength will rise as we wait upon the Lord, we will wait upon the Lord, we will wait upon the Lord. Our God, you reign forever. Our hope, our strong deliverer. Everlasting God, the everlasting God, you do not faint, you won't grow weary. You're the defender of the weak, you comfort those in need, you lift us up on wings like eagles. Rise as we wait upon the Lord, we will wait upon the Lord, we will wait upon the Lord. Strength will rise as we wait upon the Lord, we will wait upon the Lord, we will wait upon the Lord. Our God, you reign forever. Our hope, our strong deliverer. The everlasting God, the everlasting God, you do not faint, you won't grow weary. You're the defender of the weak, you comfort those in need, you lift us up on wings like eagles. God, you reign forever. Our hope, our strong deliverer. Our God, you reign forever. Our hope, your strong deliverer. You are the everlasting God, the everlasting God. You do not faint, you won't grow weary. You're the defender of the weak, you comfort those in need, you lift us up on wings like eagles. strong. You are sure. You are life. You endure. You are good. Always true. You're my light breaking through. Here's my heart, Lord. Here's my heart, Lord. Here's my heart, Lord. Speak what is true. Here's my life, Lord. Here's my life, Lord. Here's my life, Lord. Speak what is true. Speak what is true. Speak what is true. You know, it seems like this voice of this world is just so loud. It clamors in our thoughts and in our minds and knocks on our hearts. And this voice is saying, your God's not real. He's not there. And you're not significant to him. He doesn't care. But God's plan is so much different than that. God's plan and truth for us in our lives is full of freedom. It's full of life to the full, now and to eternity. God speaks his truth. He speaks his truth in his word. Let's hear from his word.
For you are fearfully and wonderfully made. Psalm 139. In Jesus Christ, you have been adopted as children of God. Ephesians 1. Rejoice, for you have been clothed with the garments of salvation and covered with the robe of righteousness. Isaiah 61. You have been strengthened with power through his Spirit, so Christ may dwell in your heart with the fullness of his love. Ephesians 3. You are a chosen people, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. 1 Peter 2.
You're all I have. speak what is true. Who breaks the power of sin and darkness, whose love is mighty and so much stronger, the King of glory, the King above all kings, who shakes the whole earth with holy thunder and leaves us breathless in awe and wonder, the King of glory, the King above all kings. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You laid down your life, that I would be set free. Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Who brings our chaos back into order, who makes the orphan a son and daughter, the King of glory, the King of glory, who rules the nation with truth and justice, shines like the sun in all of its brilliance, the King of glory, the King above all kings. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You laid down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy, worthy, worthy. Oh, this is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You laid down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me, all that you've done for me, all that you've done for me, all that you've done for me.
I don't know about you, but I don't like it when things are out of my control. Whether that's in my relationships, in my schedule, in work, even in my golf game. I don't like it when things are out of my control. Maybe that's why I like the game of golf. It feels like you can control more things. It's just you and the golf ball and the golf course. But the more I try and control the things that are out of my control, the more out of control it gets. Have you ever experienced that? Today we're going to look in Genesis, the latter part of Genesis, and look at the story of Joseph. And I can't explain all the details of the story because there's actually quite a bit of story there. Joseph was born to Jacob, and his brothers were jealous of him and the stature that he had from the beginning. And because of that jealousy, it drove them into selling Joseph into slavery to get rid of him. And so he was sold into slavery and taken to Egypt. And he was made a slave to a man named Potiphar. Now, he did an amazing job with Potiphar as this slave. He became in charge of his household. He did great things. He made Potiphar money. He was so good at his job, in fact, Potiphar's wife took notice. And in the end, Joseph was accused of a crime and a sin that he didn't commit. And unfairly then was put into jail, into prison. And while he was in prison, again, he kind of, with his leadership skills, grew to be in charge of the prison. The jailer was so impressed with how he led, with how he did things, he put him in charge of all the prisoners. And he began to interpret dreams. There was a couple instances of interpreting dreams within the prisoners. And then he was forgotten. And he stayed in prison for a long time. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Pharaoh begins to have this dream that haunts him and no one can help him with it. And one of the prisoners who Joseph helped interpret his dream remembered it and said to Pharaoh, I know a guy that can interpret dreams. And so they go and get Joseph, and Joseph comes and interprets the dream for Pharaoh. And in the end, the interpretation of the dream was you're going to have 7 years of plenty. You're going to have 7 great years where you're going to have an overflow of food and prosperity. But then it's going to be followed by 7 years of famine. And so what you need to do is really build up those resources and store all the grain and store the cattle in a way that you can make it through the 7 years of famine afterwards. And Pharaoh was impressed with Joseph and his wisdom. So he says, I need to make you in charge of all of this that's about to happen. So he does. He puts him in charge. This prisoner, this slave, is now the second most important person in Egypt. None of that stuff was in Joseph's control. He didn't dictate it. He didn't perceive it. You couldn't have written that story out for your life in any way, shape, or form, could you? I mean, just imagine just the ridiculousness of, first of all, your brothers selling you into slavery. Now, I know that here in Canada, again, that doesn't compute for us. And back then, selling people into slavery, seeing slaves, having slaves, it was a lot more commonplace. So that wouldn't have been quite as ridiculous as it is for us. But regardless of the fact, being betrayed by your own family, by your own brothers, being sold into slavery. There was a couple brothers that were reluctant to do it. I mean, they knew that it wasn't right, but they did it. And because they sold him into slavery, he ends up prospering. Because of that one moment, that one sin, that one disobedience, the thing that was actually out of Joseph's control completely was the beginning of him now being the second most important person in one of the strongest nations in the world. You couldn't have written that story any more incredible than that. What I find interesting with Joseph, and just like any of us, if we were put into that situation, he struggled with his brothers and what they had done. Of course, we would all struggle. They sold him into slavery. They betrayed him. And when the famine hit, those brothers came to Egypt looking for food and looking for help. And who do they run into? The guy who's in charge, their brother, Joseph. Now, at first, they didn't recognize him. They had no idea. And how would they? They sold their brother into slavery. There's no way. They had no expectation that Joseph would be the second most important person in Egypt. That's impossible to them. But Joseph recognized them. And he actually gave him a really hard time. And as you read this story, you're cheering for Joseph just a little bit because he's he's kind of giving his brothers what they deserve. He's giving them a hard time. He throws them in prison for a few days to make them really think, he accuses them of spying. He puts silver back into their sacks. But at one point with his youngest brother, Benjamin, who he'd never met before, and Benjamin is a bit of a key of the change of heart that Joseph has. So we'll just put that in the back of your mind. He puts his silver cup, his own personal cup, the second most important person in Egypt, puts his personal cup into the sack of Benjamin and then sends his guards after him. And of course they get caught stealing, even though, well, those brothers weren't in control of that situation, were they? It was out of their control. And Joseph is having this wonderful little cat and mouse game with his brothers, them having no idea who he was. And then finally he reveals himself to them. His heart breaks as he gets to know Benjamin, as he gets to know his brothers, as he realizes he wants to be restored back to his family again. And so they call for his dad and they have this big family reunion. I wonder how many times in Joseph's story, whether being in prison, the accusation from Potiphar's wife, the times of just being sold into slavery, how many times did Joseph look back and go, I wish I could do all that over again. I wish I knew what my brothers were going to be up to so that we could avoid it. I just want to go back home and be restored as a brother again. I'll even go back and just be with my family. Even if I don't get restored to the place that I was, I just want to go back and be with my family to be restored. How many times along the way did he wish that? How many times did he want to go back? It doesn't say. But if we put ourselves in the situation, we'd go probably quite a bit. And now that he's restored himself to his family at the end of the story, you'd think, well, now they can all go back to Canaan. And he can take all of this wealth that he has with Egypt, and now that he's found his family, he doesn't have to be in service to the Pharaoh anymore. He could go back and restore himself to the place that he needs to be with his people, with his family. But that's not what happened. Because Joseph recognizes there's something bigger going on here than just simply the things that happened to him. And I want us to look at Genesis chapter 50. I just want to read it through. Genesis 50. 18 to 21. And I want to read this to you. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, so this is right after Jacob passes away, the brothers are now concerned. What if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrongs that we did to him? So they sent word to Joseph, and they said, our father has left these instructions before he died. This is what you're to say to Joseph. I ask you to forgive your brothers the sins and the wrongs committed in treating them so badly. Now please forgive the sins of the servants of God your father. And when the message came to Joseph, he wept. His brothers then came before him, threw themselves down at his feet and said, we are your slaves. The brothers are like, now that father's dead, now that there's the connection that we had with our brother is gone, he's just going to kill us. He's the most powerful man that we know. They wouldn't have met the Pharaoh. He's the most powerful man they know. And he's like, he's going to kill us for what we did to him. We sold him into slavery. But Joseph said to him, don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children. And he reassured them and spoke kindly to them. Joseph realized he needed to let go. He needed to forgive. He needed to forgive the past in order to step into the future. He recognized that he was not in control of any of those things, and he needed to let it go. I think all of us, when we are wounded, want to keep control of our lives, and so that's why forgiveness sometimes is really hard. Because I might be miserable, but I can control my feelings. But if I go into forgiveness, if I begin to let go, if I step into something new, if I even step into the next part of my relationship, that's scary because I've been hurt already and I'm a little bit nervous and scared to step into the new thing. And that happens, doesn't it? And forgiveness can be scary because forgiveness ultimately is about letting go. It's about saying, we're no longer going to count that thing anymore. Now, it doesn't mean that Joseph forgot. He didn't forget. He said, listen, You intended this for harm, but God actually had a plan all along, and he intended it for good. So I'm going to let go of the pain and the betrayal. I'm not going to let go of the memory and the things that we've learned. I'm not going to let go of the story of where God kind of led us this whole time, but I am going to let go of the thing that stops us from being a family and moving forward together. In Philippians 3, the Apostle Paul says, I don't mean to say these things that I've already achieved them or I've already reached perfection. So he's talking about growing in faith and moving forward and growing more mature in his faith. He says, I'm not perfect, but I do press on to the perfection that Jesus Christ first possessed me. No, dear brothers and sisters, I have not achieved it, but I focus on this one thing. I forget the past and I look forward to what lies ahead. I press on to reach the end of the race and receive the heavenly prize through God, through Christ Jesus. He is calling us. Sometimes it is our past that we need to let go. It's sins in our past. Sometimes it is difficult relationships we've been in, we have to let them go. There's a lot of things that trap us from moving forward, whether that's, again, in relationships or whether that's in our work, whether that's in anything as we take steps forward. I gathered our staff together, 3 of our ministry staff, Pastor Dell, who is our adult ministries pastor, Pastor Dustin, who is our youth pastor, and Pastor Bree, who is our children and families pastor. I asked them to get together and just to sit kind of like on a panel of sorts and to kind of work through what are some of the things that stop you from moving forward. Take a listen. Well, I've asked 3 of our ministry staff to join me here today. When we met as a staff for 2 weeks, one of the things that came out of some of our discussion was it would be great to do the panel of discussion again. And if you remember back into the beginning of COVID, we would often end the service with a little bit of question-answer time. It was a way to interact and connect. And in some ways, it's a little bit of a reviving that feeling again, but it's also something else. We recognize that as a staff, we are getting that feeling from our congregation, from our leadership, and just the stage that we're in. We want to start taking steps forward into what God would have for us in the future. But how do you do that? Especially within a time of COVID, for instance, where we can't gather the same and have conversations the same, the season of transitions that we've been in for a long time. So we recognize that we need to start doing some intentional and maybe out-of-the-box things that helps us move into that direction. So kind of jumping off from what we talked about in the sermon today of we have to let go of those things in our past or the things that we're clinging to that prevent us from moving forward. Now we're going to drill down on that as a staff, and I'm really appreciative. Thank you guys for joining this morning and helping us through this. So the first question that I would throw out to you is, are we ready to move forward?
Probably the natural response, I mean, all of us, when somebody comes up and says that, we go, absolutely, we're ready to move forward. So I think, I could say that, absolutely, yes, especially those of us who are sort of eternal optimists would say, yes, let's move forward. I guess there's a whole series of questions that have to be asked. I mean, imagine, the fact of the matter is, we have a married couple on stage. If you guys are in the middle of a disagreement and you just wanted to move on, would it be fair to say, let's just move on, when you hadn't dealt with anything yet? So, yeah, I would say yes, but.
All right. How about you guys? Are we ready? Are we ready?
I think a good question would be, what do we mean by moving forward? There's a lot of things that we can move forward with, right? So are we talking, like as SBC, as a church, are we talking about moving forward that way? Are we talking about moving forward in maybe just even, for myself, is it being a children's pastor and moving forward and learning and growing in that area? We could be talking about children in their phase development. I guess my question would be, what are we ready? Like, what does moving forward, what does that actually mean? Moving forward in what?
Dustin?
I think when you ask, are we ready? In my experience, because I don't know the history of our church as well as you guys do, it naturally brings up questions of what does it mean to be ready? What does it mean in respect to where we've come from and what we've been through? Are there things that we need to deal with before we move ahead? And if moving ahead is, setting vision and plans, do those plans honor the past? Would be questions that I have. To stop and pause and pursue. Is there a need for reconciliation? To look back and look back with thanksgiving and praise for all the ways that God has provided through good and through hard times, and to pray for insight into maybe difficult places or seasons that this community has been through, and to ask God, what has He been teaching us? How has He provided? And maybe in areas where we longed for a certain specific kind of good and something else came about, can we see that still as good? And kind of look back and cherish and honor God's faithfulness in the past and pursue His healing before moving forward. Seems like a way to honor one another, to honor the community and honor God's work in us in the past before just saying, hey, let's keep going. Because then we're kind of guaranteed to keep repeating similar things that have been done in the past.
Agreed. When I kind of hear all of those things, there's questions of what do you mean by forward, for instance, as Bree kind of, there's lots of different avenues in which you move forward from. We can move forward in our faith. Are we talking about moving forward in programming? Are we talking moving forward in collectively, individually? Like, we all have these different areas in which we take steps and try and grow in and move forward. And you're right, like, what does even the word ready mean? Like, how do you get ready? What does ready look like? And are we moving ahead without any thought of context, or what are we moving into, and are we missing, like as Dell's example from the marriage, are we missing something important that needs to be dealt with so that we can move forward? As we talked in the sermon today, learning to identify what are the things that you have to let go of that are actually an anchor preventing you from moving forward. So when you think of it from that perspective of, just think individually within your lives, because I think ultimately we can sometimes get lost within the corporate size of things. Things can feel very big and overwhelming when you think of all of the things you have to corporately think of. But when we start to break it down kind of to our individual responses, have there been times in your guys' lives where you've recognized that something that you were clinging to was preventing you from taking steps in faith, taking steps in maturity, taking steps into what God was calling into next? So it might be in the simple, it might be in a spiritual sense, it might be in a relationship, it might be in ministry, but to almost give a bit of an example, it would be great to hear from you guys, so that it kind of almost frames a little bit of the context of what we're talking about, and then we can talk about more corporate size. So kind of start at the individual. So is there any places in the past where you've recognized I need to let this go in order to take a step forward into what is next?
I guess for me, and I think probably for most of us, a lot of us are held back, or else we forge ahead individually. Like when you hear the term that someone, or they were ahead of their time. So sometimes that can be one individual who forged ahead, but nobody else was brought with them. Nobody else agreed with their perspective. Now, down the road, people might look back at that guy, usually once he's dead. Oh, he was ahead of his time. But at the moment, because he was forging ahead totally on his own, Nobody went with them. And, well, I'm just going to give, a very personal thing, and I think this happens with the church, and I could go the corporate side, but you asked for personal. I just think of my own situation with my wife. When, we got into ministry, and I had all these preconceived ideas of what our life would look like, what ministry would look like, what I would do, where I would go, all of those things. And then my wife gets sick. And so I have to say, okay, well, how can, in the midst of her illness, how can I still do all of those things? Because I'm pretty sure God wants me to do them, because those were all etched in my brain. And what was the result of that? In my mind, there was discouragement. There was anger. There was some degree even a resentment toward God. Well, come on, this is what my expectations were, and you're not letting them come through. So I think lots of times, and if we get into a corporate sense, everybody, probably almost all of our folks connected with SBC have a preconceived idea of what they think we should look like. And oftentimes the circumstances, the people, the scenarios do not support what I personally want everything to look like, which forces me, and it did in my situation with my wife, when I gave up all of those expectations. I said, Lord, all I know is we've got today, and I know the circumstance I'm in today. What do you want to do in my situation, in our situation as a couple and in ministry, in the context of the circumstances such as they are? And I trust you in that. That was great freedom. But until that time comes, we're bound. Yep. Just like your message. Yep. We're captive to our preconceived expectations.
Yep. How about you guys? Sorry, I keep forgetting to use the microphone. My apologies.
I think there are so many things that stop us from moving forward. And for me personally, it's often fear related. And many times in my life, I've gotten to a place where I am growing in my faith, spending time with Jesus, hearing from him, feeling like things are going smoothly or well or fruitful. And I almost get to this point where I put myself in the place of that's enough. Because often when you're growing and things are fruitful, hard things are happening, right? Often God uses hard things to grow us and to deepen us. And I will get to the point where I'm like, nope, I feel like we've done enough, God. I feel like maybe we could just stay in this comfortable zone. And sometimes that place isn't even comfortable. Actually, it's probably not comfortable, but I know it. I understand it. I can almost control it. And so I feel like I'm really resistant to more. So I'm like, no, let's stay here. Let's be in this for a while, because the future of the next step or the next thing is unknown to me. And so I'm a little bit more comfortable in staying right where we are, because I can keep us there, and I'm comfortable with that. And that's happened quite a few times in my life, and it takes me a while to sort of recognize where I've put myself, and God's pursuit and woo of me brings me to a place again of trusting him and wanting to let go and surrender and allow him to work through my fear. And one of the things that I always love about those times is that God is so patient with me. He's not going to push me from behind to the point where I can't go that fast. He's just so loving and patient with my slowness and me being ready to take the next step. And he just keeps wooing and pursuing and loving me until I'm ready to surrender to the next step. And so the part of that stops me is my resistance to what he has next, and my zone of I'm comfortable here, I feel good here. I love how he's okay with that mess, but I'm not. Like, I'm often not okay with that mess, and I'm like, this is messy, this is too hard, I don't want to be here. But he's okay with that mess, and he takes all of that mess and grows it into something beautiful in my heart.
Thanks, Bree. How about you, Dustin?
The thing that comes to mind, at least for me in my experience, is the thing that keeps me from faith, the faith that I need to move ahead, is grief and disappointment. And how that's played out for me is when we left Pender Island, we had 5 years of really being completely out of our element and experiencing God's closeness and His provision, and discovering, I guess, that He had called us into something that we didn't really know or understand. And the experience of the adventure of discovering His heart and the heart He put in me was fantastic. And to discover community and the joy of building community, it just was so precious. And over the progression of time, our hearts kind of evolve and change. And I think what happened for me is that desire to build community within the context of circumstances allowed for me to place hope in something working out that I saw on the horizon. And so we reached for it and we went for it. And when that hope was shattered, when what we hoped for fell apart, when what we thought the promise was broke down, what is left? And that moment is very disorienting. It's very scary because it's a feeling of, oh, I got it wrong somehow. And I don't know what's next. And if God was leading us, why did He lead us into nothing? Right. Did I hear wrong? Is God who He says He is? Is He reliable? Am I a failure? And you look back, and I can really relate to Israel saying, Moses, why would you lead us out here? We had milk and honey in Egypt. And I'm not comparing Pender Island to Egypt, but the idea of looking back and always seeing it as rose-colored, like perfect. And you look back and you're filled with grief because you loved something deeply, but also because, and for me, I'm looking back with a feeling of it was perfect there. It's not perfect here. I can't move forward because I don't know where I am and I don't know what I'm doing here. Why would you bring me here? Everything I hoped for is gone in my eyes. And that place is extremely humbling and terrifying. And to be there and sit in that and ask myself the question, well, if everything I hoped for falls away, that must mean what I was hoping for wasn't strong enough, wasn't solid enough. Is God really that solid that He could take me to a place where all the good I thought I was walking into is gone, and what I'm left with is Him? Am I content with that? Am I happy about that? To have every good thing I hope for removed and be left with Jesus. Am I excited about that and filled with faith that He's going to continue to lead me into good things so I can move forward? And I can't move forward because I'm afraid that I'm going to get it wrong again. And that fear, that grief, that combination of disappointment in there is very confusing. And it's only by focusing on Jesus and His grace and His love can clarity come back.
Well, I'm glad that you all kind of brought that up, because I think all three of you shared there is a disorienting time when we feel either stuck or what we hoped for didn't happen, and now what? Or, I thought God was leading me in this direction, or I thought God was doing something very specific, and now I'm in this trouble that I didn't expect and I didn't ask for, and you're disoriented. And I think as a church, corporately, we feel that disorientation over the last 5 years for sure, just with transitions and staff, and we've had things like Glenfir, and we've had transitions of the size of our church growing and then coming back down and growing again, and all of those kinds of transitions over the years have left, I think, us as a church corporately with that similar disoriented feeling of, well, I don't know if I want to take a step forward. Like, can we not go back to what was? Because there's been some really amazing success here. There's been just absolute lives changed and transformed here over the years. And something, Dustin, that you had said earlier is we don't want to ignore or forget the things of those. You don't want to forget Pender and all of the things that were amazing there, but you can't go back to it either, right?
Yeah, and it brings me to a question. Why is it that when we think of the good old days, we didn't consider them the good old days when they were happening? Why do we always go back? Because I remember, Dustin, on Pender, like you talk about now, those were some of the good old days, but I remember when you were there and the information I got, those were not the good old days at the time, right?
That's exactly
right. And I was thinking about this, and I was thinking, it's interesting that it's in Isaiah 43 that God says, okay, I will do a new thing. And he says, don't look back. Don't spend all your time looking back. I'm going to do a new thing. But it's interesting that 3 chapters later, in chapter 46, he says, remember the former things, the things of long past. Mm-hmm. In other words, before we can really move ahead, we have to learn the lessons, from the past. And maybe that's why they're the good old days. But we need to recognize that in 10 years from now, the good old days might be right now. Remember the challenge and the excitement, and remember how all of the old stuff, we had to set it aside and forge it. But right now, that's a hard road to hoe.
I'm glad you brought that verse up. I actually had it right here as one of the verses that we could talk about.
Sorry.
Well, I love it that you like it. We're on the same track. That's fantastic. The whole idea of not considering the things of old, and then I'm doing a new thing, and then do you not perceive it? Now it springs forth. Do you not see that I'm doing this new thing? And he goes, I will make a way for you in the wilderness, in the rivers, in the desert. So this new thing that he's bringing him to is actually some difficulty. So just remember again the story of the Israelites walking through the wilderness, and there's lots of complaining and grumbling, and nothing ever went really super smooth. I wonder when they got into the promised land and were battling for cities and were trying to establish themselves, if some of them didn't think back to the wilderness time and the simplicity of gathering manna every morning, walking, and they didn't have really major battles at times, and they go, man, it would be great to go back to the wilderness again. And yet in this moment, he's like, I need you to forget Egypt. I need you to know that I got something before. So God is always pointing us into this next thing that the last thing has prepared us for. Like we're always standing on the shoulders of what was, going into something that God has now prepared for us. There's lots of times as staff or as even in individual conversations, we bring up you were meant for a time such as this, or you're prepared for a time such as this. In that we are not where we are by accident. God has a plan, and he works all things for his good. And we can make mistakes, and we can cling to things too long, and we can live in fear too long, but that doesn't mean that the way forward is ruined. God is very patient and allows us to kind of come along in the time that is needed. So when we start thinking about it then corporately, like we've talked about then of this disorientation, what are some of the lessons that you've learned kind of from that individual journey of letting go of the things that you felt have shackled your past or the things that you're even, and they're not always sin. Like we talk about like sin shackles us in our past. Yes, of course it does. The mistakes we make can shackle us. Of course they do. Our successes can sometimes shackle us from moving forward. I do this really, really well. I don't want to ever change from doing this, but maybe God is calling me into something very different. So for me, going from youth pastor into associate pastor and now trying to step into lead pastor, there's a long time where I was gripping youth pastor pretty hard because that was where my success was, and I was afraid to step forward into something new, right? So sometimes it's even success can grip us. So the individual lessons that you've learned, how can we take those individual lessons and start applying that to corporately? How do we do that as a body of believers, as a unit of Summerland Baptist Church? How do we let go? How do we start addressing and remembering and yet forgetting at the same time? It's a both. forgetting what was behind, but also remembering where we've come from. How do we do that corporately? Just thinking through some of the lessons that you've walked through individually, how do we apply that at a corporate level? What are some of your instincts in that?
Bree, you wanted to say
It's
something
such a big
before.
question. I'm like, that's a lot to think about. Well, I'm not sure. I'm just going to go here and see if this gets related. But something I've been really thinking about lately, which is going to feel like we're totally off topic now, but is I got the privilege of teaching every single one of our kids how to skate. I was their first hockey coach. They soon surpassed all of my hockey skills, but I was the one that helped them learn to skate. And the moving forward and the goal for them was to be moving on their own feet without being balanced, moving fast, being able to stop, being able to turn, and all those things. But the first thing that you teach a child when they're learning to skate is how to fall down and then how to get up, because that's usually the fear, right? They won't let go of mom and dad because they're afraid of falling. And they actually need to learn how to fall down properly so they're not falling backwards just on their butt, because that hurts a lot, right? So how do we fall sideways? And then most importantly, how do you get up? Because if you can't get up, you can't skate. And then you keep learning new skills. You learn how to push off your own skates instead of running. You've all seen a little kid running on their skates, right? Well, that's the next step of learning how to push off their blade and eventually learning how to stop. And so the goal is to be a good skater, but there's really all of these little lessons that have to be learned along the way. And if you don't learn those lessons, you have a child who's basically running on their skates and don't know how to stop. And that's not a good place, right? And that's the very first question you asked was, are we ready? Well, maybe we feel like we're ready, and then we're that little kid running on our skates and don't know how to stop. I think we need to make sure we look back and see all of the process and the learning and the things that have happened as a church and to learn from them. And your word was remember. So what are the things that we look back on and see how God worked, see how he worked through some of our mess, and learn from those things and take those things forward so that we can skate on our own feet. And taking the analogy even further, if you want to play hockey, you got to play the whole team. So you need to have everybody skating under control, working together. So individually, I think we all have heart work, all things to remember, things to work on, and then also together we get to do that as a team.
I guess I'm kind of relating this both personal as well as corporate. I remember when I first came here 19 years ago, and there was a group of people that couldn't stand what I brought to the table. They didn't like my style. They didn't like whatever my whiny voice, I don't know, whatever it was. And they left and never came back. And there was some things that were said on both sides that I wish wouldn't have happened. Now, that's the kind of stuff that can hold resentment. And at the same time, as time has gone on, there has been at least an attempt for reconciliation, and not necessarily to say, no, I'm not this way, or to change that, but to own, for me, to own who I am. And repentance when there's repentance necessary. My desire in some of those cases, there has been great healing that has happened, and even some of those are back, but some of them not. And my hope is that they found freedom away from me, But I remember years ago when we were looking at visioning and stuff, and we were talking about the qualities or the DNA of our church. And one of the things that came up is that we tend to avoid conflict. That's not necessarily a good thing. Sometimes we think, oh, we're so unified and nobody, we came up with this and nobody had any dissenting opinion. That's not necessarily a good thing. And so for me, and I'm still learning in this, but a matter, comes down to, am I willing to own my own weakness, to own my failures, to own those things, and in humility and repentance, to say both, it might be in a corporate setting, but also to the Lord, Lord, I blew it. I ran way ahead of the game. I own it. I'm going to leave that thing at the foot of the cross. Then we can move ahead. But until then, like you say, I think we can be handcuffed, and we're not free indeed. Right?
How about you, Dustin?
I think healing for me involves a process of understanding that my perception is just a very tiny, tiny thing. That God's perception is infinite and mine is just a very narrow, shallow field. And I often look back and perceive through a lens of emotion and experience that tints reality. And I find that many times I don't receive healing or reconciliation, don't find reconciliation, if I cannot stop and separate those filters and go, I have to accept in a humble way the reality that I don't understand myself, I don't understand reality, and I need to humbly accept that God is doing something I may never perceive. And to receive healing means I can kind of separate what I have perceived in the past, if people have hurt me, if I've made mistakes. Reconciliation comes when I can, in my thoughts and in my emotions, take that and separate it and say to Jesus, I don't understand everything that happened there. I know what I feel. And I know that you understand that. And that in your power, you were in that moment in time. You understand completely, and you're the only counselor that can bring healing to me and these relationships. I need to lay down, and this is like a regular thought thing, because I realize that in my thoughts, the feelings and thoughts are connected. And the more time and space I give those emotions and thoughts in my mind, the more convinced I am that it's real. The more power it has and the more authority it has in my life. And so for me to find freedom means I accept the justice of Jesus. That his justice on the cross frees me from all the ways I've let people down and been a disappointment. And it frees everyone else from all the ways they've done wrong toward me. And there is a reality I can stand in where grace covers all past and all future and makes me completely safe and healed and free, but does not make all those experiences a wash. It makes all those experiences something that can now be transformed to reveal Jesus to me. And I think if each one of us pursues that on a moment-by-moment basis, because there's moments in every one of my days where I encounter a circumstance that triggers an old wound. And I have to very deliberately take the emotion and the thought, and I have to say, no, Jesus, you understand and I don't. And you know what good you're working in my life. You're a good shepherd. I maybe don't like the grass that you brought me to, but you know, and I need to let it go. Because holding on to it keeps me a prisoner, and it keeps the person I'm holding a grudge against or resenting, it keeps them a prisoner in my mind. Because it colors who they are, which isn't who they are. And I think on a corporate level, as a community, we honor one another by always falling into that middle, that humble middle of Jesus in his grace and his love reveals each person around us. It can reveal who he really designed them to be. And if we can see that in each other and serve it in each other, then real reconciliation and freedom and healing can happen in a community. And the more that happens, the more it spreads to our neighbors and to our town. And that type of community is God's kingdom.
Well, I agreed. I think you summed that up really well. I think A lot of what we're talking about this morning is how do we engage with each other in this conversation of how do we meet one-on-one? How do we meet corporately to talk through the very things of, laying things down at people's feet, of saying sorry when I've messed up, accepting, sorry back or not necessarily, right? So one of the things that I would ask you as a congregation as you're watching this today is what is stopping you in moving forward? And that might be moving forward in faith. That might be moving forward within your life. Are there things that you have been clinging to, as we talked about in the scripture today? Are there things that you're clinging to that is stopping you from what God has for you next? And so we created a new email so that you can engage with us. And it's simply engage@summerlandbaptist.ca, and you're going to see it come up on the screen. So engage@summerlandbaptist.ca. And the question that we would pose out to you to engage back with us is, what is stopping you from moving forward? And just to start engaging in, that could be on an individual basis. If you need someone that you want to talk with, you could send us an email, and we can connect with you and pray with you and walk with you in that. If it's something on a corporate level, when it comes to our church and all the things, it might be something like COVID or things in our past or the transitions that we've been going through. If those are the issues. Thanks, Del. If those are the issues that you need to work through, then we also want you to email us in there. And then next month, on the last Sunday of February, we'll be doing a panel again. But this time, we're going to engage with the emails that come in. It's obviously not on anything that's personal or intimate. We're not going to share a bunch of dirty laundry, of course not. But what we want to do is start engaging in the conversation with you as a congregation, and that's a great way to do that until we can meet again. So thank you for joining us this morning, and again, thank you guys for taking time just to work through and start talking about some of these questions as we look forward into this new year, into 2021, and what does it look like to take steps forward into where we feel God is leading us. So thank you.
Jesus, all for Jesus, all I am and have and ever hope to be. Jesus, all for Jesus, all I am and have and ever hope to be. All of my ambitions, hopes, and plans, I surrender these unto your hands. All of my ambitions, hopes, and plans, I surrender these unto your hands. For it's only in your will that I am free. For it's only in your will that I am free. Jesus, all for Jesus, ever hope to be. Jesus, all for Jesus, all I am and have and ever hope to be. Jesus, all for Jesus, all I am and have and ever hope to be. Oh. All of my ambitions, hopes, and plans, I surrender these into your hands. All of my ambitions, hopes, and plans, I surrender these into your hands. For it's only in your will that I am free. For it's only in your will that I am free. Jesus, all for Jesus, all I am and have and ever hope to be. It's only in your will, for it's only in your will that I am free. For it's only in your will that I am free. Jesus, all for Jesus, all I am and have and ever hope to be.
Well, thanks for joining us today. As we said within the panel, we want you to send any comments or questions or engagement to engage@summerlandbaptist.ca. So engage@summerlandbaptist.ca. We want you to engage with us of what is stopping you from moving forward, or what is stopping us, maybe as a church, of moving forward. And so I just encourage you to send those in, and we'll continue to talk about that over the next month so that it's not forgotten. And we really want to engage in that at the end of next month. Thank you for joining us today. And Aggie is now going to lead us in some prayer.
Hi, my name is Aggie Woolsey, if you don't know. I am so thankful to be part of the church service, even a small part, and I would like to pray with you. Let us pray together. Father God, Lord Jesus, creator of all things and lover of our souls, we stand in awe of who you really are and what you have done for us. We are blessed to be called your people. We see more clearly now than ever before that your church is not this building. Your church is us, your people. Even though we may feel scattered at this time, we are one in you. Please, Jesus, lift the hearts of those who are struggling with loneliness and separation. Encourage our staff and those who struggle to keep your spirit alive in our community. We look to you, Lord Jesus, for a guiding light on the path ahead. And may we move together in unity and in love for each other. Your word says, "This is the way, walk ye in it." Please, Jesus, show us that way clearly, that we may truly walk in it. And in the matchless name of Jesus, the strong and matchless name of Jesus, I pray. Amen.